So we'll close off on a real light topic. Critical race theory. So it's become a sort of catch-all phrase recently, not for the actual legal methodology and its own purpose, but for the idea that ideas adjacent to this, or ideas as far-ranging as like feminism, Marxism, anti-racism, white supremacy, all of these things are now lumped into this thing called critical race theory, such that it's now officially been banned, and banned in terms of being able to be taught in public schools in 8 US states, with 9 other states in the process of doing so. So we're getting to a point where a third of American states will have a formal ban on the teaching of critical race theory. So I want to talk a little bit about like what it is, the culture around this right now, and then I want to hear what y'all think about this. You know, and just to be clear, if you're listening to this right now, it's like a big topic. There's a lot of sides to this, but this is just get the ball rolling. Now, critical race theory started in the 80s by some legal scholars, many of whom were like grad students, and I'm going to be kind of casual with this. I'm not reading off anything, but they were grad students at Harvard. Professor they liked a lot leaves because he's like, this place is kind of racist. I don't really like this. They start their own little crew. They start a conference. They start getting together and rethinking what it means to approach legal theory from the perspective of being like legal scholars and lawyers of color, how they're combating racism within their field and thinking about it in sort of systematic ways. Now, they're influenced by critical theory. Critical theory comes out of the Frankfurt School, and it's a bunch of like philosophers, sociologists, theorists who are using philosophy and social theory to examine society, not in terms of individual beliefs or desires, but societal and cultural structures. Meaning that like, if we're going to say that like Billy is racist, the question isn't why does Billy feel racism in his heart? It's what are the structures in his life and education that have led Billy down a path where he's become sort of interpolated as this like racist subject. So that's kind of like the framework of critical theory. They take that into looking at the law. So critical race theory in general had nothing to do with like teaching children that Thomas Jefferson was bad, although he is and was. It has to do with looking at the law, our theory of rights in America, and the way in which many laws participate in these structures that perpetuate bad things. Now, for the critical race theorist, you know, for them, racism isn't like a bad vibe you have in your heart. It's a systematic and institutional thing. It's not about individual feelings, beliefs, and preferences. Also, they argue that race is a socially constructed identity, because of course they point out some of the literature there. When you know, enslaved humans came over from Africa, there was no category of like, these are black people. It was people from diverse cultures speaking tons of different languages from lots of different areas, but they get conflated into this one social category by the people, you know, by white people that were running plantations and stuff like that in America. So it's kind of like the general framework there. But now it's being banned in schools. The fun thing is I looked up a Texas Tribune article talking about this, and they interviewed some teachers, and I found this very funny. So it's not funny that it's getting like banned at the state level. That's very problematic and weird, but it's funny some of these teachers responded, how they responded. So Andrew Robinson, who is an 8th grade US history teacher, said, "Nobody in K-12 is teaching critical race theory. If I tried to walk in and teach critical race theory, my kids would just have a blank stare on their face." I don't think he's like dissing it. He's simply saying like, this isn't a part of like what we teach in history class. Someone else, this is Kathleen Brown, who teaches at UT Austin, said a vast majority of teachers in K-12 schools don't know critical race theory. They're not coming into the classroom and saying, I'm going to teach critical race theory. So it creates this interesting question, like, why are we stopping this thing in schools that's not being taught in schools? Why do people want to clamp down on the teaching of a thing that's not taught? And what does that really mean? Last thing sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was going to say, I was speaking to a teacher from Florida where Governor DeSantis, similar order. And I was like, you know, this is an anecdote. This is one teacher's sort of experience. But I was like, what does it actually mean, right? Because, you know, you're not going around teaching Kimberly Crenshaw or Derek Bell or any of these people. And she was basically like, it's super vague. And basically it means that if I say the wrong thing and offend the like wrong kid, they're going to complain to their parents, and then like I'm going to get fired. And I think that's part of the scam, is that it is, if you want to criticize the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, like, go ahead. There are certainly criticisms of it, but basically people have made it so amorphous to be like, well, you said that racism's bad, and you said that like slavery was bad, so that's critical race theory. So basically, like, I feel like, you know, talk about free speech, like a bunch of teachers are going to sit around being like, ooh, like, is it okay to mention that, you know, Thomas Jefferson did medical experiments on his slaves? That might be critical race theory. Someone might complain about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it like with the school example, it's almost like if my son, Chadwick III, is in class, I guess the fear is that like the teacher will teach about the history of racism, white supremacy, all these structural things in America. Then my son, Chadwick, will feel bad about himself. And Chadwick will think, oh no, am I bad for being white? And a lot of the critical race theorists don't want Chadwick to feel bad. The irony, of course, is that the entire framework of critical race theory isn't to say that Chadwick should feel bad about himself. It should be that Chadwick is unconsciously participating in systems that predate his conception, that have shaped the way our society and culture and legal system works, and we can think about those things critically. So Chadwick, my golden boy, is not like a Klansman now. It's just that he might be unaware of the privileges afforded to him as being a white in the current system or something like that. But it seems like the fear is that he cries and comes home and I call the school and say, how dare you?
Yeah.
It's amazing to me the lengths we'll go to prevent a white person from feeling uncomfortable, but people of color, they can just kick rocks.
What is also so like perversely fucked up about this as critical race theory it's about the systems. It's again not about like oh, you have hatred in your heart. It's like, hey, we have all these laws, the way our courts work, the way prosecutors work, they're all supremely fucked up, and like you can feel bad. You could go to a diversity training, but that's not going to fix this shit. Like we need to like change laws, change our legal structure, etc. I was reading, there's a great New Yorker article about this guy who basically popularized it among conservatives called Christopher Rufo. But basically he was reading like Robin DiAngelo. What's her book called? How to be
White.
Oh, White Fragility.
White Fragility.
Yeah, like he read some of these sort of like, you know, very sort of corporate friendly, like anti-racist things. And noticed like in one of the footnotes, there was like reference to Kimberly Crenshaw, one of these critical race theorists. And he's like, oh, is this the secret behind it? But people like Kimberly Crenshaw in this article makes a comment like, hey, I think a lot of what these like diversity trainings are doing is like not what I would do or not what my work stands for. Like, you know, not that she's categorically opposed to them, but yeah, it's a weird conflation that basically has become to mean anything that I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, the conflation thing is real. I think it gets used to describe anything that implies or points out systematic racism in the foundational history of the country. It's used to criticize anything that's critical of capitalism. Anything that calls the dominant system into question is now critical race theory.
Incredible.
Yeah. It's like postmodern neo-Marxism. It's like basically like cultural Bolshevism, which was the Nazi term. And I'm not saying all these people are Nazis, but I think these sort of bogeymen. And it weirdly, like, I remember there's this one Glenn Beck episode where he like had this board about like why feminism was Marxist or something, and like it all went to like Angela Davis and Herbert Marcuse. And in this article about Rufo, it's basically the same thing. It's like, well, you know, Herbert Marcuse was a Marxist and he taught Angela Davis and she was a feminist, so therefore
well, Marcuse came up, so one of the people who's sort of like the quote unquote intellectual figures around this is James Lindsay, who has a PhD in mathematics. Noted like mathematics, not humanities, not sociology, not literature, not philosophy, not legal studies. And he runs a website called I shouldn't even said the name because I don't think you should go to it. But he's been speaking about this and writing about this. He likes to throw around like words like Marcuse and Marxist. Recently, he did a segment on Mark Lamont Hill's YouTube show where he talked about this, and it's very fun. At the end, Lamont Hill, who's like a legit humanities and politics scholar, kind of owns him at the end by showing he doesn't have any idea what he's talking about when he says Marxism. Because Marxism, like, for many of these people, and to be clear, I'm not saying Marxism is good or bad. I'm just saying it means a thing. And there's a history behind that word and a series of concepts that go with that. And they're just throwing it around to mean like, I don't know, like your kid gets put in a camp or something. But I'd say the final thing I find great about this is so much of it boils down to this, that critical race theory is racist against white people. And that is another thing you will see in a lot of the discourse and the literature, which once again is funny because critical race theory itself talks about how race is a socially constructed category. So to say that you're racist against white people essentializes this thing called whiteness in a way that would be against that structural analysis anyways. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to be like open and stuff. I don't even know what that means to be racist against white people.
Thoughts and prayers for white people.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other part of the scam is like to talk about racism is critical race theory, to talk about race is critical race theory. But actually, because talking about race means critical race theory, if you say the word white, therefore it's racist, which like as a framing of a thing, you can't, if you're talking about slavery, it's like, well, who enslaved Africans? Is like, well, you know, you can't say white people because that's racist. You know, like
it was particular people.
Yeah, it was particular.
Happened to be from Europe.
Or like, what kind of parents were, you know, boycotting school integration? Well, I don't know. You know, who has like money, you know, generation through generation from slave handshakes? I can't tell you anything. It's like,
sorry that their grandparents worked hard, Alec.
Yeah.
The thing that makes me nervous about this in general entering the discourse is the way in which it is sort of against asking the questions that are fundamental to the humanities and social sciences. Many of those questions which presuppose that the world isn't the way it is because of any preordained goodness, but because humans have constructed things in a certain way, and because humans have constructed them a certain way, we can criticize those constructions. But I don't know. Any other thoughts on critical race theory?
I feel like I have a lot more empathy now for the struggles of the white man.
You know, my work here is done.